Well, a few weeks ago, DeepSeek set the world on fire with a LLM. There's a whole lot of LLMs out there. So, in this video, David Linthicum and I are going to talk about the LLM, when to use LLMs, what are other options regarding models that we could potentially use, and what's going to be best for your organization in your AI architecture. So I would like to welcome David Linthicum. David Linthicum is an expert on cloud computing and AI. He told me about the job that he had in 1985 with AI systems that landed him a job at NASA in AI in the 1990s. And that was just the beginning of David's AI experience. So he brings an enormous amount of experience with us. And we're so grateful to have him here today. For those that don't know me, who's probably not many on our YouTube channel, my name is Mike Gibbs. I'm the CEO of Go Cloud Careers. I've been a network architect, security architect, enterprise architect, all in all, for about 25 years now. And this is my world. I love architecture and I love training architects. So, David, DeepSeek comes out. And to me, I looked at it and said, oh, very interesting LLM, but another LLM. But out of nowhere, there's every email I get, there's 1,001 LinkedIn posts, there's 4 million videos. And I'm like, wow, what just happened there? So, David, you've been an AI architect for a couple of decades. Can we talk about this a little bit?
Sure, Mike. It was a funny week for me. I think I talked to 12 different reporters, and none of them used any of my quotes, and that's because I was, kind of calm about DeepSeek and not, following the hype stuff. I think the most interesting thing to me was the fact they were able to build an LLM that normally costs other companies, including IBM and Meta and OpenAI, $125 million to $150 million just to build one version of the model, and able to do it for $6 million. And use lower powered processors and the ability to kind of do things in an innovative way. That was interesting to me, how they came up with it. But at the end of the day, these things all are, plus or minus 3 or 4 percentage points of each other. I mean, you look at the benchmarks, some of them run a little faster, some of them run a little slower. Some of them have more parameters than others, things like that. But at the end of the day, these things are trained on the whole of information that can be found on the internet. Every book, every article, every video, every podcast, and everything can be found in these large language models. And that unto itself, as we discovered a couple of years ago when ChatGPT showed up, is amazing. We're able to use it for lots of awesome purposes. And because it knows everything, we're able to assemble this information any number of ways, and we're able to spit it out as an audio file, as a video file, as a text, able to do a voice translation. All this stuff is there. So we can talk to it like a human being. But everybody did it. And so we have probably 50 of these things now. There's not a week that doesn't go by where someone wants to brief me about their new LLM they just came up with. And it's basically like the old LLM, probably updated with newer information. So as some people say in the AI world, and the AI world has been pretty pragmatic about this, and they say, we're out of information. We train it with everything that's out there. Obviously, we generate more information as we go, but it's not going to incrementally have the value. There's an MIT and Nobel Peace Prize person. I thought he said it well. He says, the best we can hope for in the next 10 years is a 0.5%, half of a percentage gain in innovation that occurs in the AI space, certainly in the LLM stuff, because the information is not being built. We can build better technology and cheaper technology to process those systems, and that's kind of what DeepSeek did. But we're just replicating the same problem over and over again. And these things cost as much as a small city's budget, for a couple of years, and also powering a small city. Mm-hmm. I just don't think we need 50 of them. So people have a tendency to be confused about that. They view generative AI and LLMs as coupled. I understand we use generative AI to build LLMs, but at the end of the day, it's a model, and it's a model that's able to take huge amounts of data and discern it down into a knowledge model that allows us to do amazing things. That problem's been solved. Yeah. So we know the value of that, and basically now it's free. So this amazing stuff, I can get access to ChatGPT-4 via their API systems for $10 a month. And so, and get at every access, and there's no limitations to how I use it, and get at every service that the thing is able to do. So I'm able to bind it into my applications and leverage AI as a force multiplier for my system by using these environments. But at the end of the day, Mike, we're trying to build business purpose use cases for this.
Yes.
And so the LLMs being around, I think those are very handy utilities to have. However, it's our own data that's more important to us,
Yes.
not the data that's on everything that's in ChatGPT on the open internet. So how do we take our own business data and make more sense of it? Leveraging LLM certainly is a resource, but that seems to be the most important problem to solve. So the value of LLMs, I think, is going to change a lot over the next few years when they do see that it's not incrementally getting better. It's providing the similar capabilities, just be able to produce the same information in different ways. And so we're probably spending too much time and energy on looking at this. And I think it's causing some confusion in the world that we live in the architecture world, because everybody is looking at that as a model in terms of how they're going to deploy generative AI within the organization. Almost never are you going to build an LLM. Try telling a CIO that you got to spend 120 million bucks to build one system that's going to be able to carry out certain stuff. Even if you make it specific to the organization, that's way too much. So people are going to use small language models. It's going to be tactically focused, systems that are built with that are purpose built to solve very specific problems, and able to roll these things out in a short period of time. So LLM stuff, awesome. I think when I saw the, kind of the hype driven goat rodeo that we went through as an industry, a couple of weeks ago, I kind of said to myself, we're not looking at the core problems we're looking to solve. However, it's a little tough sometimes because you're going against the zeitgeist out there in terms of where people are looking. Everybody was excited the fact that we could build an LLM for $6 million. I think that was kind of the story unto itself. But at the end of the day, we're incrementally no further and then having some innovative tasks. Everything DeepSeek did was done before, and they just used it in a certain way because they had to. They weren't allowed to have access to the processors, and they just became innovative and took their training their system using other LLMs. I thought that was, that's a good idea, but that's not a new idea. It's been around for a long period of time. So it's interesting to see this whole industry morph into something that's moving from the spectacular in terms of the impact that generative AI made with the introduction of the LLMs like ChatGPT, and the pragmatic way in that we're going to have to deploy it. And so there's going to be, a bit of a pragmatic hangover, so to speak. I think when people see that there's no more to be done on the LLM space, they certainly have a role, but they're not the role. And 95% of the value that's going to come from generative AI is going to come from leveraging our own business data in ways that allow us to turn that business data into a true force multiplier, innovative differentiator for the business. And that's where the focus should be right now. So I don't mind seeing the hype. I thought it was interesting to watch, but we're probably not, we're looking at the shiny objects. We're not looking at what we need to do.
Yeah. And if we think about it, I want to go back to you're talking about the small language model, and I always think about accuracy. So, and in addition to business use. So for me, I'm always concerned about accuracy because prior to architecture, I come from medicine, and I was trained on where do you get accurate sources of information. And if I train an LLM on the whole internet, I'm going to get Reddit, which is going to be full of all kinds of questionable information, Billy Bob's website, Fred's Aunt Martha, who's never been a physician but has a health website, and I'm going to be training that data. By comparison, if I train it on real scientific research, real data, real medical literature and expertise, all of a sudden the accuracy I'm going to get is going to be much better. So I think we can be at a point where we can be more accurate in many cases by training based on what we need, and make it more business relevant based on what we need, and make it more secure based on what we need by actually training what our needs are, as opposed to looking for the next LLM. But I'm not an AI architect like you. I'm a security architect and enterprise architect. So how would you react to that, David?
No, I think you're spot on, Mike. And I think that, that's where the focus needs to be. You don't need an LLM just to deal with an industry focused process, or just to deal with a business process that's localized to your own organization. So even if you're doing, say a supply chain management system, I'm probably overusing that example, but you're going to build a small language model to manage your supply chain in a way where it's able to grow in knowledge, is able to do things incrementally better as it builds and builds and learns, which is the great thing about generative AI, because in essence, you're creating an organism that's going to learn, grow, and provide additional value to you. But you don't need to incorporate an LLM in making that happen. You don't need to upload your data to ChatGPT, which you certainly can. Your ability to leverage a unique model, which can provide you with instantaneous reaction, is going to be very cheap to store and very cheap to run, is going to provide you a lot more value. And whether you want to do this in an agentic-based solution or a monolithic-based solution doesn't really matter. It's all going to have the same stuff because you're building a model that just does that. I mean, the last thing I want, you just kind of hit the medical thing. I don't want my doctor going out to ChatGPT to figure out a diagnosis. I want them to go out to some sort of a scientific database where the data that was learned to train the data is hardened and proven, where you're not going to get hallucinations, things like that. So you simplify the purpose of the AI model you're looking to build, and you're going to get much better results. It's going to run on cheaper hardware, and you're going to be much happier with the end state of that. So I see people trying to build systems, based using LLMs as a platform. That's not what they're there for. So the LLMs are going to be resources we're able to leverage from the small language model based systems. They're able to, carry out things like, tell me about the flu, penetration of the type A flu that occurred last year, because I need it for my logistics management systems, because I need to have an understanding how many people are going to call out sick. And I can make an estimation as to how that is, and even can tell me on that, or what the weather patterns have been like for the last year, or, key economic indicators, things like that are secondary data elements for my particular system. So I'm managing my supply chain using my supply chain data, my inventory data, my logistics data. That's mine. And I'm building my models based on those systems. I'm only going out to an LLM, to carry out tertiary, kinds of things that, may need to add value to that, but that doesn't become the core of the system. No. So that confusion is out there, and I thought it would basically go away after a few years, but I saw with the DeepSeek stuff, it's still very much part of it. People love talking about the stuff, but, when I, ask them, well, what's the difference between, why should we build a new LLM when you have existing ones that are working just fine? We can get cheaper at building them. And I think people are just figuring that out now. We're kind of at the point of saturation with the value of LLMs, what we understand about LLMs, and certainly their capabilities. And we don't need 50 of them. So
no, we sure don't. And I think what happens is people take a certification that really doesn't teach them the underlying technology, how the technology works, or how it fits together. All they learn is how to build it, not what they're building, why they're building, where they should build it, any of it, just how to. And at the end of the day, everybody sees LLMs on a certification. That's what they think of, and they don't realize all the architectural options that are there. I've seen a lot of that in people I've spoken to. They get a certification, and they're almost biased to something without even knowing what it is. Not always, but sometimes.
Yeah, I see it a great deal. I mean, they, we'll talk about the slight differences between, the Meta LLMs that are putting out the Llama-based stuff, and the OpenAI stuff, and the stuff IBM has, and the stuff NVIDIA has, and things like that. And they're very adamant about doing that. And normally it goes down to the fact that they learned into a certification that related to those particular LLMs. And you can get certifications out there and how to manage and how to run, Llama versus GPT, and which is all well and good, but the thing is, you can't really make a career out of just focusing on how you're going to operate those things, because there's not a lot of specialization in how you make that happen. So the biases come when people don't necessarily understand the bigger picture. We love to focus on very narrow domains because we can understand it and we can leverage it, but that's not going to help you here. Your ability to understand in a holistic domain in terms of how LLMs relate to everything else that is in a generative AI ecosystem, how you deal with training data, how you deal with model tuning, how you deal with, data management, the ability to, build RAG-based systems. All these things are going to be more helpful to you than how you just leverage an LLM, what they mean, and also what the differences are. I get involved sometimes in these conversations where they just end up going nowhere, where they're talking about the slight differences in the LLMs, and they bring up the chart and some of the benchmarks that are done in the LLMs. They say, well, look at that parameter versus that parameter, things like that. In terms of the importance of what it means to the architects and the value that's able to bring to the business, there's really kind of not a lot there. And so people are focused on areas that aren't not necessarily going to bring value back to the business. And I don't see why people need a certification on one versus the other. They need a certification on what generative AI is, what the architectural pattern is, some of the stuff we're teaching here,
Yeah.
Mike, what it means, how to, take these processes and go out and look at a business problem and solve it using a technological solution, which is inclusive of generative
Yeah.
AI, which an LLM is a small part of. It's not necessarily the core part of. So that doesn't measure how we build and deploy these AI systems. And I think we're probably going to figure that out, but we haven't yet, kind of based on what I saw with the DeepSeek stuff.
Yeah, I think that's there. It's never even about the technology. I mean, technology is just a tool. It's choosing the right tool for the job. And that's where, and you've seen and I've seen it, people are so excited by the tool. And hopefully it's early in their career when they're excited and they don't carry with that level of bias with them later. Imagine a doctor that said, I really like this pill and I'm going to give it to everybody. And, to me, architecture and medicine is really the same thing. It's truly figure out what problem you're trying to solve, get as much information as you can, make some flavor of a diagnosis or a hypothesis, rule the diagnosis in or out the way we all consultants do it with these mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive hypotheses that we test, and then go build that plan and make that plan awesome. And, that's the way I view architecture. David, it's sad. I love architecture. I always have. And I know you've been an architect for decades. And I don't think a lot of people realize that architecture is mostly a business role.
It is a business role, Mike. It's an executive role. In fact,
Yeah.
you have to take leadership capabilities, and you have to look where the holistic nature of the business is going, and consider all things in making these decisions. And it's not focusing on a particular task. That's what engineers do, and they're really
Right.
good at that. So architects are C-level folks. That's why they always, when the next job after an architect is promoted, is normally going to be CIO or a
Yep.
CTO or a CEO, because they carry on a business role and responsibilities. The good ones do. There's some out there that are, probably misfocused in different directions. But if you talk to the architects of most of the Fortune Global 2000 companies out there,
Yeah.
they're much more astute in terms of what the business is, rather than the technology. So you want to talk to them about the importance of one LLM versus the other. They're never going to want to have that conversation. They're going to talk about the core business, their business that they're in charge of, the problems that they're having within the business, and how they need solutions to approach those problems, and the ability to configure the right technology to make it happen. So they view technology as an enabling path to get to a
Yes.
solution. They don't view it as something that's going to be the path unto itself. So technology is there as a tool that's always going to change to solve different solutions, and understanding the business is far more important, and the ability to communicate, is far more important. And I tell people in class all the time, drawing the boxes and getting to logical architecture and physical architecture, that's easy. I can teach you
Yeah.
to do it pretty quick. I said the harder problem is figuring out how to deal with a disruptive C-level person, how to deal with a compliance issue, how to communicate with team members in terms of your ability to kind of move toward a solution, how to run projects, how to price projects, how to manage projects, and the ability to have written and verbal communication where everybody is going to be referring to you as someone who knows what they're doing and that knows as a true leader. That's where the role is. And so
Yeah.
that doesn't mean if you don't want to do that, you can certainly, bounce back to another technically focused job. I
Yeah.
made a decision at one point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I made a decision at one point in my career that, okay, I'm a coder, a software engineer. I'm going to go ahead and transition to moving into an architect because I viewed that as a more interesting problem to solve than just sitting down and solving a micro problem. And in doing that, you have to understand that you're going to have to adapt, and have to adopt, different skills and technologies and your ability to communicate. I was not a good writer. I was not a good verbal communicator. And I just did it a bunch of times. I said, the only way I'm going to learn this is reps. And so having communications and running meetings and having, talking to people, and the ability to, configure the technology stuff, understand things holistically, learn something about the business that I wasn't willing to understand when I was an engineer. And so you're using a different set of muscles, so to speak, in moving
Yeah.
that direction. And you have to kind of decide that that's something you need to do, and you have to dive into it both, feet first. It's not going to be a lot of technical discussions. In fact, if you want to have technical discussions, that's normally going to eliminate you in the running of becoming a good architect. And by the way, I see architects that are, very technically focused, certainly with product companies, things like that, but they're very limited in their capabilities
Yeah.
and the ability to get value out of them. And right now, Mike, we're at a point where I see, 10 architecture jobs that are chasing one qualified candidate.
Yep.
And people are complaining all the time. We can't find people because there's not a lot of good ones out there. I know, where the major architectures are. And so we need roughly, 1 million people out there that are going to have an
Yes.
architecture role. And I think at the very much, maybe we have, a couple 100,000 that are qualified.
Max.
There are
that are
people
qualified.
that, yeah. So your ability to kind of get in this role and ability to figure out that this is a path to a career, I think, is an important thing. Good news is it pays well.
Yeah.
Good news is job security. Good news is you get to be a business leader and learn those characteristics. So if you like that, that motivates you. You're looking to figure out how business meets technology. That's the job we want to be looking for. But you have to understand that business is meeting technology. It's not technology, just
Yes.
technology, or else you're going to misfire and not necessarily focus where you need to focus.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to clarify for the audience, because when you and I say configure, I think we have a different definition than the rest of the people. To me, the configuration of a demilitarized zone might be a network load balancer front-ending 2 next-generation firewalls and another network load balancer in front of 2 IDS IPS systems. Is that your definition of configuration, or is your definition of configuration typing in or coding it?
No, my definition of configuration is the ability to align technology to
Yeah.
the needs of the business. And I just use configuration because
Yeah.
people kind of understand that term. But it's a logical architecture in terms of how that thing is going to be presented to the business, is going to solve the issues with the business, and it should represent the business. I should look at an architecture and see how the business processes are going to fit in there, the major entities that we're dealing with, the major departments in the organization, and the problem we're solving. The technology, how we map it into a physical instance, that's going to be different from year to year. In other
Yes.
words, the technology is going to change, things like that. And I'll just pick the best of breed to make that happen. But darn it, man, understanding that logical solution to what you're looking to do and the ability to explain it in such a way where people can understand it, your teammates can understand it, you can understand it, you can write it down, is absolutely imperative right now. We're missing the planning that's getting us to the right solutions. And until we get that, I think we're going to end up misfiring. We're, doing lots of things now where we're repairing stuff, architectural mistakes that were made 10 years ago, migrating things to the cloud that probably shouldn't have been migrated to the cloud or should have been changed when we migrate to the cloud, the ability to alter a database, the ability to change the way in which you manage and focus data. And that was basically getting to those mistakes, talking about the problems that we're having now, too much focus on the technology, too much hype-driven stuff, and not enough focus on how the business relates to it. And I think that's we're coming around and seeking that right now. I wrote an InfoWorld article 3-4 weeks ago, and I talked about how 2025 is going to be the year of the architect, just because we're coming around to this way of thinking. I'm having more people that are willing to have this conversation, and fewer people that are pushing back on that.
Yeah.
So I think people understand that, okay, we made a bunch of mistakes. We really need to do things better. This architecture role is something we probably should have looked at and took a bit more seriously. We need to put some better planning in here and better alignment to the business. Because right now, certainly with the AI stuff coming, we're going to make mistakes with 7 zeros on the end of it. 16 zeros on the end of it, based on the businesses, misaligning their technology and to the business.
Yeah, it's interesting. I could say most of my life as an architect was repairing a problem. Somebody spent $1 billion on something. They got no business benefit out of it. And now they're like, okay, what do we do now? How do we get something out of this? And it's like, well, okay, what problem were you trying to solve? And then it always goes down to looking at their architecture team. And I can tell you, when I find these things, they have a whole bunch of great techies that don't have a business knowledge, and they don't know what they're designing and why they're designing. David, you've interviewed a lot of people for architecture roles, right?
I have.
To hire. Okay.
Thousands.
And I've interviewed thousands. And here's the guy. One of the things I like to tell people: if you agree with it, great. If you don't agree with it, please tell people what you agree with, because I just want to have an honest discussion here. But when I interview people, I don't have a hard time finding someone that can configure something. I don't have a hard time finding someone that did 800 projects on the cloud. They're easy for me to find. The hard part that I have when someone went through their training is they said, I built a website, I put it on a Linux machine, and I set it up, and I say, okay, what was the website supposed to do? Why was the rationale for the type of web server you chose? Did you choose IIS? Did you choose NGIX? Did you choose IIS? Why? Where your users going to be coming from? What are the performance level? What are the compute needs? What are the security needs? What are the network needs? What are the architectural trade-offs you configured? And I start going down that path, and they can never answer it, because what they learned was the how-to as opposed to the why, and opposed to what are the parts and the pieces that together. So for me, most of the time when I interview someone, they don't get hired because they don't have the actual knowledge of the things to plan, the things to consider, the things to do. They just know how to. Have you had a lot of that when you interviewed a lot of people for architecture roles?
Yeah, it's certainly an issue that I found runs rampant out there. So people, I always ask them, tell me about the last few, or tell me about the solution that you built that you were most proud of, the business solution you built, and they get into the technology behind it, and the fact that it had good benchmark numbers and all that stuff is well and good. I would ask them, well,
Mm.
what business reason did you use to pick that? And many of them would answer honestly. They say, "Well, I went to reInvent and I saw it up
Yeah.
on a presentation. I took a photo of it, and I just replicated it back when I came back because obviously the AWS guys are going to know what to do." Well, what happens if it was a Microsoft solution that was going to be the more optimized, or a mixture of the
Yeah.
two, mixture of all of them? Did you have an understanding where the business is looking to go, where they are now? Problems they need to solve this year, as well as the next 5 to 10 years. Did you understand how that journey is going to be? Did you figure out some sort of a logical roadmap in how you're going to build and drive the business by using technology to make it happen? The focus always goes back on the technology, and I understand why. It's a more fun conversation to have. Just like a conversation we can have on
Mm.
DeepSeek versus ChatGPT. People love those sorts of things, but at the end of the day, this is getting down to the rationale of the business. In other words, your ability to look at the business, your ability to dissect it, get down into the reasoning of it, figure out where these businesses are going, figure out what's motivating the people, the stakeholders, the employees, figure out what's motivating the market. In other words, where are you going to sell your wares? Figure out how best to get there with a logical configuration of concepts and understanding. So, really, when you build the solution, the technical solution to make it happen, it's a fairly easy process. If I understand everything about the business, and you should do that as an architect, how goods are produced and how they're shipped and logistics and how they're sold and how they're gotten to the hands of the customer, all those sorts of things. I'm able to look at that, and then I have an understanding as to where I can look where the innovative opportunities are, where I can take the business, to make it much more efficient. And if you don't have that knowledge, you're never going to get there. You're just going to throw technology and money at a problem, and it's just going to build technical debt. It's
Yeah.
going to get you no further down the line. And so when I'm interviewing people like that, I just tell them that, thank you very much, but you're not giving me I would tell them, by the way, in the interview, you're not giving me the answers I think I need, which would
Yeah.
come from an architect. You're giving me answers that would come from somebody who's very knowledgeable with the technology. And
Yes.
obviously kudos to you for doing that. But understanding of the business, don't you believe that that's going to be a more important process to make it happen? Never get an answer back. And it just, and people who do answer that correctly, they'll get hired.
Yeah.
But the big problem is we're not teaching that in college.
No.
We're not, people aren't getting those things through the on-the-job experience because they're learning from the wrong
Yes.
mentors and architects. They're not pushing them in the right direction. And now it's time to start correcting that. In other words, we have the tools and the technology, like AI stuff everywhere. We can automate everything and anything. So let's focus that on making a run at making the business better.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's a question I would ask. How did your architecture make the business better? And normally it wasn't an answer; it was a bit of a word salad as they were,
Yeah.
responding to me. And it was not. It wasn't disappointing. It was sad that
Yeah.
there's not an understanding out there to a point where I could understand that this person worked a $10 million project for a major global 2000
Yep.
company and built a largely under optimized system. And I could tell that based on the way they responded, because not a lot of thought went into doing it. They would always tell me, well, it works and it's fast and the users like it. That's all
Yep.
well and good, but you missed the mark. You didn't get to an optimized technological solution that was based on the needs of the business. And if you're unable to make those links, you're not going to build something that's going to bring value back to the business. So that thing, at the very least, is going to be a value drain on the business until they decide to replace it. That's why we're seeing repatriation and refactoring, all the stuff that's going on the days. That means we made a mistake and we're fixing it. That's going to be a candidate for doing it. Or worse, it's going to be, go off in perpetuity as something that's going to be removing resources from the business.
Yeah, which we don't want to do. They can only be spent in one place. David, thank you for that. I know we went into a couple of things. Our conversation naturally turned into career discussions, which often happens with David and I. And, I just love watching people get hired. I know what it's like to interview people. I know where the weaknesses pop up. David's seen the weaknesses. Together, we've probably interviewed over 10,000 people, I'm sure, maybe 15,000 people, because, we do a lot of interviews and when we lead an architecture team to figure out who's going to be our team and what we need. And we've both been executives hiring a lot of people. So that's why I wanted to give this to you. So I hope you'd enjoyed our discussion on LLMs versus small language models versus other architectural things you could talk about in the world of generative AI. If you want to learn how to become an architect, an AI architect, a cloud architect, an enterprise architect, a security architect, or even a network architect, join us on a completely free architecture webinar. We'll go over the role. You'll either hear from me or David or both of us, who knows. We'll talk about what we do. We'll talk about the actual skills you need to get hired, things you can put on your resume to get hired, and the things that are going to separate you from everyone else. And of course, we'll answer any questions we can to assist you in your career completely free on these Zoom sessions. So join us. Register for a free webinar. The link is in the description of this video. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe, and hit the bell to our channel to be notified of new videos to assist you in your architecture career, whether it's cloud architecture, AI architecture, enterprise architecture, security architecture, or network architecture. This is Mike, and with David, we're signing off for now. We will see you soon.